Before Rome crowned itself master of the Mediterranean, before Latin laws and legions defined the ancient world, there was another city, a city that faced the sea. Its name was Carthage. The story begins not with an army, but with a woman. According to ancient tradition preserved by writers like Virgil, Carthage was founded by a Phoenician princess named Dido, known to her own people as Elissa. She was royalty in the wealthy city of Tyre in modern Lebanon. But power breeds betrayal. Her brother, King Pygmalion, murdered her husband for his gold. Dido fled by sea, carrying loyal followers and whatever treasure they could salvage. They sailed west, across waters already threaded with Phoenician trade routes, until they reached the North African coast. There, a local ruler agreed to sell her as much land as could be covered by an ox hide. So she cut the hide into thin strips and encircled an entire hill. It was clever, it was audacious, it was Carthaginian. On that hill, the Byrsa, a new city rose. Whether myth or memory, the legend reveals something deeper than fact. Carthage did not conquer its beginning, it negotiated it. Carthage was not born from nothing, it was an heir. The Phoenicians were master sailors, shipbuilders, and merchants. Their cities, Tyre, Sidon, Byblos, dotted the Levantine coast. They traded cedarwood, glass, metalwork, purple dye prized by kings. They did not build massive land empires, they built networks. And Carthage inherited that mindset. Instead of marching inland, Carthage looked outward, toward the sea. Its position in North Africa was strategic, central to Western Mediterranean trade routes, close to Sicily, Sardinia, and Spain. The sea was not a barrier, it was a highway. Over the next centuries, Carthage expanded its influence across North Africa, southern Spain, Sardinia, Corsica, western Sicily. It established colonies, trading posts, naval bases. It grew rich, very rich. Unlike Rome, Carthage was not driven by land hunger. Its strength was commercial. Its harbors were engineering marvels, especially the great circular military harbor, designed to house hundreds of warships in protected docks. At its center stood a command tower overseeing the fleet. This was not accidental growth. This was design. Carthaginian ships sailed beyond the Pillars of Hercules, past modern Gibraltar, into the Atlantic. They traded along African coasts. They mined silver in Iberia. While Rome built roads, Carthage built routes, and wealth poured in. But wealth is visible, and visibility attracts rivals. Across the Mediterranean, on the Italian peninsula, another power was expanding, the Roman Republic. By the 3rd century BCE, Rome had subdued most of Italy. Through alliances, brutal wars, and political discipline, it had forged a powerful military system. The Roman legion was relentless, disciplined, flexible, persistent. Rome was not yet a naval superpower, but it was ambitious, and it was watching Sicily. Sicily sat between Rome and Carthage, strategic, fertile, contested. When a local conflict erupted in the Sicilian city of Messana in 264 BCE, both Rome and Carthage intervened. Neither trusted the other to control the island. Neither would step back. Thus began the First Punic War. Punic, from the Latin word for Phoenician. This would not be a short war. It would last 23 years. The First Punic War. At the start, Carthage had the advantage. It dominated the sea. Rome had barely any navy, but Rome adapted. After capturing a Carthaginian ship, the Romans reverse-engineered it. They built fleets at astonishing speed. Then they added an invention, the corvus, a boarding bridge that allowed Roman soldiers to storm enemy ships and turn naval battles into infantry fights. Rome transformed sea warfare into something it understood: land combat. The war dragged on. Storms destroyed fleets, armies starved, treasuries drained. Victory shifted back and forth. But Rome had something Carthage underestimated: endurance. In 241 BCE, after a decisive Roman naval victory, Carthage sued for peace. The terms were harsh. Sicily was lost. Massive reparations were imposed. Carthage's pride was wounded. For the first time, Rome had defeated a major Mediterranean power, and it learned something important: Carthage could bleed. Rebuilding in Iberia. Defeat did not destroy Carthage. It forced adaptation. Carthaginian leaders turned to Iberia, modern Spain, rich in silver mines and manpower. There, a powerful family rose to prominence: the Barcids. Hannibal Barca led campaigns to rebuild Carthaginian strength. With him was his young son, Hannibal. According to tradition, Hannibal made the boy swear eternal hatred toward Rome. Whether literal or symbolic, the oath shaped history. Hannibal, Rome's nightmare. In 218 BCE, war returned. The Second Punic War began, when Hannibal attacked a Roman-aligned city in Spain. But instead of waiting for Rome to invade, he invaded Italy. With war elephants, with perhaps 50,000 men, he marched across the Pyrenees, across southern Gaul, then across the Alps. Thousands died in snow and ambush, but he emerged in northern Italy. Rome was stunned. The Battle of Cannae, 216 BCE. Hannibal's greatest triumph came at Cannae. Facing a massive Roman army, he used a double envelopment tactic, drawing Roman forces inward, then surrounding them completely. It was slaughter. Perhaps 50,000 to 70,000 Roman soldiers died in a single day, one of the worst defeats in Roman history. The Republic trembled. Allies considered defecting. Rome seemed breakable, but it did not surrender. Hannibal in Italy. For over a decade, Hannibal campaigned across Italy. He won battles. He humiliated legions. Yet he lacked reinforcements from Carthage's political leadership. Rome avoided direct confrontation when possible. It adopted a strategy of attrition, exhausting Hannibal, cutting supply lines, refusing decisive engagement. The Roman general Fabius earned the nickname the Delayer. Rome was learning patience. Meanwhile, Rome struck elsewhere, in Spain, in North Africa, and eventually the war shifted. The Battle of Zama, 202 BCE. The final blow came not in Italy, but in Africa. A young Roman commander, Scipio Africanus, carried the war to Carthage's doorstep. Hannibal was recalled home. At Zama, Roman discipline met Carthaginian experience. This time, Rome prevailed. Hannibal was defeated, and Carthage was forced to submit. Humiliated, but alive. The peace terms were devastating. Carthage lost Spain. Its navy was reduced to 10 ships. It was forbidden to wage war without Roman approval. Massive financial penalties were imposed. Carthage was no longer Rome's equal. It was subordinate, a client state, a shadow of its former power. And yet, it did not collapse. Its merchants returned to trade. Its farmers cultivated fertile North African lands. Its markets filled again. Within decades, Carthage was prosperous. Not militarily powerful, but economically vibrant. And in Rome, some began to fear that prosperity more than armies. Because Rome had defeated Carthage twice, but it had not erased it. And that fact would change everything. Carthage survived. That was the problem. After the defeat at Zama in 202 BCE, Rome believed it had broken its rival permanently. The fleet was reduced, the empire dismantled, the indemnity enormous. Carthage was forbidden from waging war without Roman permission. It should have faded into irrelevance. Instead, it prospered. A city reborn, without an army. Freed from constant campaigning, Carthage turned inward. Its fields in North Africa were among the most fertile in the Mediterranean. Grain exports surged. Olive oil and fruit production expanded. Trade networks, though diminished, revived across the Western Sea. Carthage became efficient, disciplined, focused. Without armies to maintain, wealth accumulated faster. The indemnity to Rome was paid ahead of schedule, and when the final installment was delivered, something unexpected happened in Rome. Concern. Because Carthage was no longer weak, it was stable. And stability in a rival is dangerous. Rome's paranoia. Rome told itself that Carthage was contained, but Roman memory was long. They remembered Cannae. They remembered Hannibal marching across Italy. They remembered smoke rising from Roman fields. Carthage had once nearly destroyed them, and that kind of memory does not fade, it ferments. In the Roman Senate, debates grew sharper. Some argued Carthage was harmless, a trading partner, a useful buffer state in North Africa. Others saw something else. Potential. Potential to rise again. Potential to ally with enemies. Potential to wait. And Rome did not tolerate potential threats. Cato the Elder. Among those who feared Carthage most was a Roman statesman named Cato the Elder. He had visited Carthage on a diplomatic mission. He saw the markets, the ships, the wealth, the energy of the city. It unsettled him. Back in Rome, no matter the subject of debate, agriculture, roads, taxation, Cato ended his speeches with the same words. Carthago delenda est. Carthage must be destroyed. Not defeated, not weakened, destroyed. It became ritual. It became political pressure. And repetition has power. Politics of fear. Rome was no longer fighting for survival. It was expanding aggressively. Into Greece, into Asia Minor, into new territories. Victory fed confidence. Confidence fed ambition. And ambition demanded security. In Roman political culture, preemptive war was not considered immoral. It was considered prudent. Better to eliminate a rival before it regains strength. Better to destroy than to risk humiliation again. Carthage's recovery was framed not as resilience, but as preparation. Fear became narrative. Narrative became policy. The Numidian problem. To the west of Carthage lay Numidia, a North African kingdom ruled by Massinissa, Rome's ally during the Second Punic War. Massinissa understood the political climate. He knew Rome distrusted Carthage, so he provoked it. Numidian forces repeatedly encroached on Carthaginian territory. Border disputes turned into raids. Farms were seized, villages harassed. Carthage appealed to Rome for arbitration. Villages harassed. Carthage appealed to Rome for arbitration. Rome delayed, or ruled in favor of Numidia, over and over. Carthage endured humiliation because the treaty after Zama was clear. Carthage could not wage war without Roman approval, even in self-defense. A desperate decision. For decades, Carthage tolerated the harassment, but pressure mounted internally. Citizens demanded action. Their land was being taken piece by piece. Finally, in 151 BCE, Carthage mobilized an army against Numidia, without Roman permission. It was a gamble. It was also a mistake. The campaign went poorly. Carthaginian forces were defeated. Thousands were killed or captured. But to Rome, the outcome didn't matter. What mattered was the technical violation. Carthage had taken up arms without approval, and Rome now had its excuse. The ultimatum. In 149 BCE, Rome declared war. The Third Punic War had begun. But this war was different. It was not about territory. It was not about tribute. It was about finality. A Roman fleet crossed to North Africa. Carthage, realizing the scale of threat, attempted diplomacy. They surrendered hostages, hundreds of noble children, as a sign of submission. Rome accepted them, then issued new demands. Lay down your weapons. Rome ordered Carthage to surrender all weapons and military equipment. Carthage complied. Tens of thousands of shields, swords, catapults handed over. They were disarming themselves completely, believing submission would spare them. Then came the final demand. Abandon the city. Rome informed Carthage that the population must evacuate. The city itself would be destroyed. They could relocate inland, away from the sea, at least 10 miles from the coast. They could live, but Carthage would cease to exist. This was not negotiation, it was erasure. For a maritime civilization whose identity was bound to the sea, this was cultural death. The harbor was not just infrastructure, it was memory, it was ancestry, it was survival. To abandon Carthage was to abandon themselves. The decision. For a moment, silence, shock, grief. Then fury. Carthaginian senators realized what Rome intended. This had never been about treaty violations. It had never been about Numidia. Rome had decided long ago, Carthage must disappear. And so, after surrendering hostages, after surrendering weapons, after pleading for peace, Carthage chose resistance. They would not leave their homeland. They would not dismantle their own city. If Rome wanted Carthage erased, Rome would have to burn it. In 149 BCE, Rome came not to negotiate, it came to end something. A vast Roman fleet crossed the Mediterranean and anchored off the North African coast. Tens of thousands of soldiers disembarked, confident, disciplined, certain this would be swift. Carthage had surrendered its weapons. It had handed over its hostages. It had been stripped of its fleet decades earlier. Rome expected compliance. Instead, it found defiance. The invasion. When Roman envoys announced that Carthage must abandon its city, the illusion shattered. Panic turned to rage. The gates closed. Messengers ran through the streets. Workshops reopened overnight. If Carthage was to die, it would not die quietly. Rome had miscalculated something fundamental. Carthage had lost its empire, it had lost its fleet, but it had not lost its pride. Roman miscalculations. The Roman consuls leading the campaign assumed an easy siege. They expected a city paralyzed by fear. Instead, they faced walls stretching nearly 20 miles, reinforced and defended. Carthage was one of the most fortified cities in the ancient world. Triple-layered walls in some sections, towers overlooking approaches, a population now united by a single truth. There was no mercy coming. Rome's early assaults failed. Siege engines burned. Assault ladders collapsed. Roman troops were repelled again and again. What was meant to be a demonstration of dominance was becoming a prolonged struggle. And Rome hated prolonged struggles. Carthage moved with astonishing speed. Every available space became a workshop. Temples were stripped of metal to forge weapons. Public buildings were dismantled for timber. Blacksmiths worked without rest. Within months, the unarmed city had produced thousands of swords, hundreds of catapults, new shields and armor. They were rebuilding an army from nothing, and they did it under siege. Carthage made a radical decision. Slaves were freed en masse, not as charity, as necessity. Thousands were given weapons and a choice: fight for the city or watch it burn. They chose to fight. Former merchants became soldiers. Former servants became defenders of walls. The city was no longer divided by class. It was united by extinction. The siege consumed everything, even hair. Carthaginian women cut off their long hair to provide fibers for catapult ropes. In a world before industrial materials, rope meant tension. Tension meant defense. Hair became weapon. Jewelry was melted for metal. Children carried stones to the walls. This was no longer an army defending Carthage. It was Carthage defending Carthage. The street fighting. The Romans tried direct assault. They paid for every step. Carthaginian defenders fought from rooftops, from narrow alleyways, from behind barricades. Boiling sand and stones rained down. Flaming projectiles lit the sky at night. The siege stretched from months to years. 149 BCE became 148. 148 became 147. Rome's frustration deepened. Supply lines strained. Morale dipped. The greatest power in the Mediterranean was being stalled by a city it had disarmed. Humiliation was returning in a different form. Roman frustration. The Roman commanders rotated. Failures mounted. Political pressure in Rome intensified. Carthage was supposed to be a lesson. Instead, it was becoming an embarrassment. Rome needed someone disciplined, someone ruthless, someone who understood both pride and destruction. That someone emerged in 147 BCE. The rise of Scipio Aemilianus. A young Roman noble, adopted grandson of the hero who defeated Hannibal at Zama, stepped forward. His name was Scipio Aemilianus. Unlike his predecessors, Scipio imposed strict discipline. He restructured the army, cut corruption, restored order. He understood something critical. Carthage could not be rushed. It had to be strangled. He tightened the siege, built massive earthworks, blocked the harbor. Starvation crept in. Inside the city, food ran low. Disease spread. But still, they refused surrender. 3 years of resistance. For 3 years, Carthage endured. 3 years of hunger, 3 years of fire, 3 years of watching Roman camps grow stronger outside their walls. The city that once commanded fleets was now trapped behind stone. Yet it fought, until finally, Scipio found the weakness. A section of the outer defenses, undermined, exhausted, vulnerable. Roman forces surged forward. This time, they did not retreat. They broke through the outer walls. Rome was inside, and the real destruction was about to begin. Rome was inside. After 3 years of siege, hunger, and failed assaults, the Roman army had finally breached the outer defenses in 146 BCE. But taking a wall is not the same as taking a city, and Carthage was not finished. Brutal urban warfare. The moment Roman soldiers poured through the breach, the war changed. This was no longer a siege. It was close quarters survival. Carthaginian defenders did not retreat in formation. They fell back street by street, turning their city into a maze of resistance. Narrow roads became choke points. Rooftops became fortresses. Every doorway hid a blade. Roman discipline met desperate fury. And desperate fury is unpredictable. House-to-house fighting. The Romans advanced block by block. When they captured a building, they did not hold it peacefully. They smashed through walls into neighboring homes to avoid exposed streets. Fighting happened through stairwells, across balconies, over collapsing beams. Soldiers fought in darkness thick with smoke. Blood ran down stone steps. The screams of civilians mixed with battle cries. This was not a battlefield. It was a city being dismantled while still alive. Fires begin. At first, the fires were accidental. Torches dropped, oil spilled, wooden beams ignited. But soon, the flames became deliberate. Romans set buildings ablaze to flush out defenders. Carthaginians burned structures to block Roman advances. Wind carried embers from roof to roof. Smoke swallowed the skyline. Carthage, the great maritime power, began to glow red against the Mediterranean night. The sea reflected the fire. Civilians trapped. Not everyone inside Carthage was a soldier. Tens of thousands of civilians, merchants, farmers, children, were trapped between advancing Romans and spreading flames. Food was already scarce from years of siege. Water grew contaminated. Families hid in cellars. Others fled toward the citadel, the Byrsa Hill, the highest and most fortified point in the city. Hope narrowed to one place, the Temple of Eschmun. Atop the Byrsa stood the Temple of Eschmun, a sacred sanctuary dedicated to a healing god. Now it became the last refuge. Carthaginian leadership, remaining soldiers, and civilians gathered there. Among them was the Carthaginian commander, Hasdrubal. Roman forces surrounded the hill. Fires crept upward. Smoke thickened. The city below was collapsing. Inside the temple complex, decisions had to be made. Surrender or annihilation. Mass suicides. Ancient accounts describe scenes of despair. Some families, refusing enslavement, chose death. Some leapt into flames. Others killed loved ones before themselves. The horror was not organized. It was chaotic, a civilization cornered. The Romans watched from below, as parts of the citadel burned from within. Carthage was destroying itself rather than surrender whole. The slaughter. When Roman troops finally stormed the Bursa, resistance collapsed into massacre. Soldiers cut down defenders. Civilians were dragged from hiding places. There was no distinction anymore between combatant and non-combatant. 3 years of Roman frustration poured out in violence. Scipio Aemilianus, the Roman commander, reportedly wept as he watched the city burn, reciting lines from Homer about the fall of Troy. He understood what was happening. Not just victory, erasure. 6 days of fire. For 6 days, Carthage burned. 6 days of smoke rising into the sky. 6 days of buildings collapsing. 6 days of bodies buried under ash and stone. The once great harbor filled with debris. The markets were silent. The walls blackened. By the end, the resistance was broken. There was nothing left to defend. The surrender. Approximately 50,000 survivors, men, women, and children, emerged from the ruins, starving, exhausted, traumatized. They surrendered to Rome. They were chained and sold into slavery. Carthage, the maritime empire that once challenged Rome for dominance of the Mediterranean, had fallen. But Rome was not finished. Because destroying a city is one thing, erasing a civilization is another. When the fires died, silence did not bring peace. It brought completion. Carthage was no longer resisting. It was no longer burning. It was no longer alive. Now Rome began its final task, the systematic destruction. This was not chaos anymore. It was policy. Under the command of Scipio Aemilianus, Roman forces began dismantling what remained of the city. Walls were torn down, streets cleared of rubble. Not to restore them, but to level them. Temples desecrated. Public buildings reduced to stone heaps. The great harbors, once engineering marvels that housed fleets, were destroyed. Warehouses emptied, statues broken, records lost. The city was not merely defeated, it was unmade. Rome did not want Carthage weakened. Rome wanted Carthage gone. The survivors. The 50,000 who surrendered were not spared. They were processed as spoils of war. Men, women, children, chained, catalogued, and sold into slavery across the Roman world. Families were separated, names dissolved into ownership. A people who had commanded trade across the Mediterranean were now commodities within it. Carthaginian identity began to scatter, not through migration, through captivity. The question of salt. A story would later emerge that Rome plowed salt into the earth of Carthage so nothing would ever grow there again. Historians debate the truth of this. There is no clear ancient evidence that fields were literally salted on a massive scale. But the legend survives because it captures something emotional. Rome wanted the land itself to reject Carthage. Whether salt touched the soil or not, the message was unmistakable. This ground would never again host a rival. Erased from the map. In 146 BCE, Carthage ceased to exist as a sovereign power. Its territory became the Roman province of Africa. The Mediterranean, once contested, became, in Roman terms, Mare Nostrum, our sea. With Carthage gone, no Western rival remained. Rome would expand into Spain, Greece, North Africa, and beyond. The destruction of Carthage did not end Roman wars. It ensured Roman supremacy. An entire civilization had been removed from the geopolitical equation. Rome unchallenged. The fall of Carthage marked a turning point. Rome was no longer merely a republic defending itself. It was an imperial power shaping the destiny of continents. The psychological barrier had fallen. If Rome could erase Carthage, what could it not erase? The lesson echoed forward through Roman campaigns for centuries. Total war, total victory, total elimination. Was it genocide? Modern language asks uncomfortable questions. Was this genocide? Ancient warfare was brutal by default. Cities were often destroyed, populations enslaved. But Carthage's destruction feels different. This was not retaliation in the heat of battle. It was premeditated. For decades, Roman leaders repeated the same phrase: Carthage must be destroyed. And eventually, it was. Not because it attacked, not because it rebelled, but because it existed. Rome did not just defeat an enemy army, it erased a rival civilization. Memory versus power. Yet here is the paradox. Carthage is gone, but we still speak its name. Rome achieved dominance, but dominance is temporary. Memory is not. Archaeology has uncovered ruins beneath the soil of modern Tunisia, fragments of walls, pieces of harbor, traces of a people who refused to disappear quietly. And even Rome, in time, would fall. Empires rise, empires burn. Empires believe they are permanent. But permanence belongs to neither victor nor victim. It belongs to memory. On the last day of Carthage, smoke covered the Mediterranean sky. Somewhere in that smoke were centuries of trade, language, faith, and identity. A city that began with an ox hide and a clever queen ended in ash and chains. The sea that once carried Carthaginian ships carried Roman war fleets instead. Power had shifted, but at a cost measured not only in lives, but in culture, in stories never told, in futures never lived. Rome erased a civilization, and in doing so, it revealed something eternal about empire. Fear can justify destruction. Victory can demand annihilation. But history remembers both the conqueror and the city that burned. Carthage fell in 146 BCE, but its shadow still lingers across the Mediterranean. And every empire that rises must eventually confront the same question Rome once answered with fire. Is survival enough? Or must your rival cease to exist?